Let's talk about Generation X, the so-called forgotten middle child. But what if that whole story we've been told, the one about the cynical, detached slacker, what if it's just completely wrong? I mean, you've heard all the labels, right? Cynical, apathetic, maybe a little distant. Those are the words that have been stuck to them for decades now. But is that really what's going on? Or have we been missing the point entirely? Well, here's a different thought. What if those things we see as flaws aren't flaws at all? What if they're actually incredibly sophisticated psychological adaptations? A kind of resilience, built quietly over time, forged in a really specific environment. Okay, so let's dig into this. Let's peel back the layers on this misunderstood generation and see what's actually going on under the hood. All right, to really get their mindset, you have to understand the worlds they grew up in. And for Gen X, that world was all about massive change and, frankly, a whole lot of instability. So look at this. This isn't just a history lesson, right? It's more like a blueprint for a certain kind of mindset. I mean, think about it. You're growing up watching huge political scandals unfold. You see corporate layoffs everywhere. You're coming home to an empty house a lot of the time. These aren't just things that happened. They're experiences that shape you. They teach you a really core lesson. And fast, the world is unpredictable. And at the end of the day, you've got to rely on yourself. In that environment, it forged 5 key psychological traits. And here's the kicker. These traits are almost always mistaken for something else. So, let's break them down. Okay, first up, and this is a huge one, early self-reliance. You could argue this is the bedrock of the entire Gen X mindset. Remember the whole latchkey kid thing? They learned to solve their own problems because, well, who else was going to do it? You're not waiting for a parent to get home to help with homework. You're just figuring it out yourself. And that does something profound. It doesn't just make you independent, it fundamentally shifts your whole perspective. You learn, deep down, that solutions come from you, not from someone swooping in to save the day. And this is such a crucial distinction. It's not a choice, it's training. It's not pride or arrogance that makes them slow to ask for help. It's a deeply wired habit, almost like a psychological program that's always running in the background, saying, you can handle this, because you've always had to. All right, that leads us right into the second trait, which makes perfect sense when you think about it, institutional skepticism. I mean, if you spend your formative years watching the big institutions fail, governments in scandal, big companies laying off loyal workers, you just learn not to have blind faith in them. You build this mental model of the world where you see these big systems is, well, kind of fragile. So trust, that becomes something you're really careful with, and you mostly invested in yourself. And just to be clear, this isn't some teenagey fight the power rebellion. It's a calculated caution that comes from experience. They've seen the promises get broken, so yeah, they're going to ask for the receipts. It's just a practical way to deal with a world they learned was pretty unreliable, and you got to admit, that feels pretty relevant right about now. Okay, trait number 3. This one gets misunderstood all the time. Emotional containment. This is probably where that whole cold or distant stereotype comes from. See, in a lot of households back then, the vibe was just be tough, handle your business, don't make a big fuss. So you learn to process your feelings on the inside, not wear them on your sleeve. And the result of that? You get adults who are weirdly calm when everything around them is pure chaos. And I want you to really think about that reframing for a second. It's not that they're emotionless. It's that they're internally regulated. What looks like detachment to us is actually intense internal management. It's a skill you learn when, being vulnerable just wasn't really on the menu.
And all that internal control leads us straight to trait number 4, a really deep-seated pragmatic realism. They're grounded, they're practical, and they're definitely skeptical of big, shiny, idealistic promises. And there's a really clear reason why. If you're trying to start your career during a recession and you're watching people get laid off left and right while you can barely find a job, yeah, you're going to develop a different relationship with work and money. Idealism kind of goes out the window when you're just trying to pay the bills.
But see, this isn't pessimism. It's preparedness. It's operating on the assumption that, hey, things might go sideways, so you build a backup plan and another one. They'd much rather have a solid plan B than just cross their fingers and hope for the best. Which brings us to our 5th and final trait, and you could honestly call this their superpower, high adaptability. Think about it. Gen X is this unique bridge generation. They actually remember life before the internet. But they had to get fluent in the digital world, not for fun, but to survive professionally. And when you go through a massive change like that, it actually strengthens your brain's ability to be flexible, to learn new things, to solve new kinds of problems. Yeah, this line really nails it. They didn't grow up digital, they became digital. That's so different from digital natives who were just born into it. Gen X had to actively learn and adapt. They saw the whole revolution happen in real time, from vinyl to streaming, from library card catalogs to Google. And going through that, it just makes you incredibly versatile. Okay, so we've looked at these 5 traits. Let's put it all together now. Because this is really that aha moment, where the myth of the cynical slacker just falls apart, and you start to see the reality of the quiet survivor.
So look at this comparison. This is where it clicks. Every single one of those negative labels, when you really look at it, is just a misunderstanding of a strength that was born out of necessity. What people call quiet and distant, that's independence because they had to be. Skeptical and cynical, no, that's just being experienced after seeing systems fail. Cold and emotionless, that's being controlled because showing vulnerability wasn't really an option. And disengaged, that's actually adaptability because when the world keeps changing on you, you learn not to get too attached.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that the Gen X mindset was never about apathy. It's always been about a quiet, tough, hard-won resilience. It's basically a psychological toolkit built specifically to navigate a world that's unstable. And that leaves us with one last pretty interesting question to chew on. In the world we live in today, which is full of its own crazy changes and uncertainties, is it possible that the Gen X mindset, that mix of self-reliance, skepticism, emotional control, and adaptability, is it more than just a generational quirk? Could it actually be a blueprint for survival?